All right, Unit 4, Lesson 5, Explore. Students should be able to identify and factor special products. Identify and factor the difference of squares and perfect squares. All right. This says subtracting two perfect squares will always factor to the sum and difference of the square roots. All right, subtract, that's a perfect square, that's a perfect square. And when you subtract them, you end up with the sum and the difference of the square roots. Okay? The sum of the squares is always prime and cannot be factored. Sum of the squares, sum cannot be factored. Cannot be factored. Okay, or is prime is another thing to call it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe mom's calls it does not exist. I don't know, but you can't do the problem. Okay? There has to be a negative in between the two perfect squares. Okay? So x squared is perfect. It's a perfect square. What's a perfect square? Name some perfect squares. 1 is a perfect square because it's 1 times 1. Okay? 4 is a perfect square because 2 times 2. 9 is a perfect square, 3 times 3. 16 is a perfect square, 4 times 4. Okay? And so on. 5 times 5. 25. What's 6 times 6? 36. How about 7 times 7? 49. 8 times 8, 64. 9 times 9, 81. 10, I'm going to keep going. 10 times 10 is 100. 11 times 11 is 121. And 12 times 12 is 144. 13 times 13. So this is usually how far you need to know up to, but you don't need to know. You can get out your calculator and put 144 in and do the square root of, and you'll get a 12. Okay, that'll tell you a whole number. If you get a whole number, that tells you they're perfect squares. Okay, so perfect squares factor to, with a minus in the middle, they factor to having the root in the front, the root in the last, first, last, and then the signs are opposite. And you're done. Okay? Perfect square, the root is first. This root is last. Opposite signs. Done. Look at this one. The 3 is not a perfect. But don't forget, you're still looking for GCFs. So if you take the 3 out, what are you left with? 3 times w squared minus 4 are squared, right? That reduces to a 4. So that's a perfect square minus a perfect square. So my final answer would be the root of the first, the root of the second, a plus and a minus. Done. Okay? And you cannot factor a perfect square plus a perfect square. Just perfect square minus a perfect square. All right? And then factor using square roots of the first and last term and the sign from the middle. All right, that's a little confusing. The roots of the first and the last with the signs in the middle. So middle sign. So let's try some of those. So let's see. That's a try. You could remember this or you could just do this. This is a guess and checker because there's a 1 in front of the x squared. So I know an x goes there and an x goes there. They're just saying if you recognize this constant here as a perfect square, then one of the things to guess, instead of doing a factor pair, it's probably just going to be the square root is what all they're saying. And if this is a plus and a plus, then that's a plus and a plus. And you'll see that final answer is x plus 7 squared. I accept this on the test, but your homework might want x plus 7 squared. Okay? That is the root of the first, the root of the last, and the sign that's first. So look at this one. The root of the first, the root of the last, the sign of that one. It's because it's a negative first and then a positive, which is 2 negatives. Oops, what did I do wrong there? I did that because I was going too fast. X minus 3 squared is my final answer for that one. All right, how about this one? Let's see, it's got a lot going on. Is there a GCF? 4 doesn't come out of 25, so no, and they don't have any extra letters. They just have 2 variables. So I can still guess because that 4 is a perfect square and that 25 is a perfect square. So let's try the root of that first here, root of the last here, and then the sign in the middle. Okay. And this one here have big number. Oh, this one you can take a 4 out. So even though the 16 is a perfect square and the 4 is a perfect square, that doesn't mean you shouldn't take out your greatest common factor. In fact, if you forget to do it, let me show you what happens. You're not totally lost. Let's say we went to the square root here, and then the sign of the middle. But notice there's a greatest common factor still in both of these terms. A 2 can come out of here, and a 2 can come out of here. So 4 needed to come out. So that's a little tricky to go from there. Let's see, so 2 out of here would be 2x minus 1, and a 2 out of here would be 2x minus 1, okay? So let's go back to what we were doing over here. 4 into 16 is 4. 4, 1. 4, 2x, the root. 1 is a perfect square, don't forget, and the sign of the 1 in the middle, or because it's negative positive, it's going to be 2 negatives. So our final answer is 4, 2x minus 1 squared. Okay, let's